Hello, Jenna and Music. I'm Julia. This is my very first YouTube video, but I really wanted to respond to your What Are Lesbian Terms video. In answer to your question, first of all, because I did watch the whole thing, I am what I consider a fluid lesbian, which is a term you didn't mention, but it basically means that I prefer women and I'm usually with women, but occasionally there's a man that I'm attracted to or that I desire. I just have slightly different understandings of some of the terms you were talking about. And maybe I've just encountered them differently, but I was curious about your take on some of this. First of all, a pansexual, in my understanding, isn't someone who doesn't see genders in other people. It's someone who really is attracted to multiple genders, who, I mean, pan means all, so doesn't discriminate because this person is attracted to multiple. Not that they don't see the distinctions necessarily. Also, you mentioned that transgendered might have something to do with differences in anatomy, and I assume you meant sort of a disconnect between, physical anatomy and psychological gender that's sort of societally imposed. But differences in anatomy, I just wanted to make sure you weren't referring to, like intersex individuals, because they're sort of so ignored in our society. But actually, 1 in 2,000 babies is born with like externally ambiguous genitalia. So, but those people are not, in fact, necessarily. I mean, they certainly could be transgendered, but they don't have to be. Also, I just wanted to talk about the word boy, B-O-I, because it's a pretty common lesbian term these days, and it means, sort of a butch who doesn't want to model themselves on a sort of mature person looking for a long-term relationship, someone who's sort of looking to play the field and is sort of honestly modeled after like a teenage boy in some way. I actually read a lot about it in this wonderful book that I have next to me. It's, I don't know if you've heard of it or read it, but it's called Female Chauvinist Pigs by Ariel Levy, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's fucking fantastic. I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Also, heteroflexible is, in my understanding, not a term that refers to an ally of the queer community necessarily, but someone who identifies as mostly heterosexual, but is flexible about that identity and is interested in dabbling in some way. Although I really do like the idea of referring to allies as heteroflexible. Also, oh right, ex-gays. Yeah, ex-gays. Yeah, they don't actually, they're not really not gay anymore. I mean, I have a very close friend who is sent to this kind of Christian conversion therapy, and they don't, these organizations themselves don't actually claim to be able to change the desires of the person, but more to help them sort of tame their behaviors and recognize that it's sinful and that they should essentially consent to live a lie in order to be in cahoots with God. So also, as a final thing, I think it's really important to note that all of these terms certainly have their place, and I think that they're very helpful, but there are lots of queer people who don't want to identify themselves, to categorize themselves, to sort of label themselves with a certain term, who find that very limiting, and I think that there's definitely something to that. But anyway, thank you so much for your videos. They're great, and I hope you respond.